Welcome, Ana Maria, to Don't Get It Twisted. I'm super excited today. We're going to be talking about our family and the people who make up our family, both our chosen family, our blood family, and our greater communities. So I just want to start, if you could do like a mini story of who your family is and how
Yeah.
they became.
Yeah. So yeah, family's super complicated, but also, in Spanish say amplio, like expansive idea for me. My immediate family is like really the center of my universe. I mean, I feel like even as an adult, those four people, my parents and my sibling, are like very much my grounding in the world. And because we came from both my parents kind of came in some ways were like a little bit like I don't want to say they're not outcasts, that's not the right word, but like but different than the rest of their family, and then they came together and created their own unit that felt like their truth. And so we're always in some weird way a little bit of the outsider in both sides of my bloodline.
Yeah.
Um and and my father's Cuban, raised in Cuba, came over to Miami, and then wound up becoming the only communist and leftist in his family of major right wing Republicans who are, many of them supported Trump and just like deeply divided politically than most of his siblings. And he's the oldest one. My mother comes from Scotch Irish heritage. Her great grandmother was Cherokee. Her family was like, Protestant white folks who were civil rights people in the South. Basically, my grandfather's a minister, ran one of the only integrated churches in Thomasville, Georgia. So it was in many ways his own kind of going against his own environment as well. But they both met at Duke. And then my family, my immediate family, I with John, my husband's Jewish, Italian, Hungarian, Spanish, that kind of Sephardic world. And then, like New Yorker, born, raised New Yorker. And my children are both adopted. Sydney is, you didn't ask any of the heritages of anybody, but I'm like telling you everything because I think it's part of like what is so crazy about my family is all of the people that we represent. But Sydney's Cherokee and Jewish and Black, and Luca is Black American, African American from Arkansas. Sydney's from North Carolina. Um, Again, both of my children's heritages we're getting to know more about. We did our whole ancestry. Like Sydney wanted us to do ancestry this year, and so we did that for everybody. And just learning again where our roots are and where are the places that we connect. But deeply believing that family is not through bloodline. Family is something that is generated and created. And I'm just learning that through adoption. I mean, I think before I adopted, I didn't really think about that or even necessarily understand that at the level that I understand now.
Mhm.
And then I have this family contratiempo that is this generated, created, manifested family. That is something that is a family that breathes in and out constantly. It's not a set family in terms of there have been people who have come in and out, and there have been people who I am still in relationship to and will always be in relationship to, and there are people who I will probably not never talk to again, maybe never talk to again. So like it's a um yeah, I'm interested to talk a little bit about that part too, like the how family is in some ways. For me, family means like no matter what, you're there for someone.
Mhm.
You're no matter how bad or ugly it gets, like they're still going to be, you're going to still stay in relationship with them. um and so I think that's what family has started to become for me, is like the people who I know I'm gonna, no matter how hard it gets, that we'll still be in relationship with, and we stand for that. That's I think what family means to me these days.
Check. Yeah, and I'll share a little bit about my family too. Both of my parents are oldest siblings, um, and similarly, like I wouldn't call them outcasts, but they're very different from
Mm-hmm.
their families. Um, Both of my parents are like geniuses. First of all, geniuses.
Yeah.
They're computer engineers. They met in school. Um, yeah, and then got married in 2000 something. I don't remember, but um, I don't know. This always sticks out in my head when I think about how our little, when it was just me, my mom, and my dad, how we kind of came together. Um,
Mhm.
but like, I like when my mom and my dad started getting serious, I was like, oh yeah, he's my daddy. I'm gonna start calling him daddy now.
Yes.
And other people in my family were like, but that's not your daddy. And I was like, but he is. Like, he gives me piggyback rides and he like rocks me from side to side and he rolls me over with watermelons and does all these things.
Yeah.
Right? And like he's there. He's there. He shows
He's like he is my dad.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was always really touching too because when he proposed to my mom, he also proposed to me. Like before he proposed to my mom, he proposed to
Oh.
me. He was like, is it okay if I like officially adopt you as my daughter? And I was like, but I already am. What do you
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, but
But
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah. And so like he proposed to me, and then he proposed to my mom, and we became this like
Mhm.
triad of just love and care, right?
Oh, I love that.
And then we moved to North Carolina, and the family grew by two more little sisters who I love. And I think, especially in the last year that we've been in quarantine, because
Mhm.
actually it was just a year, it's been a year since I came back to North
Like
Carolina.
literally this week. I think it's
Yeah, this past
Mhm.
week, right?
Mhm.
Like March 16th, I think was the exact date because it was right before my mom's birthday. But I think what it's really taught me is like the value of showing up, the value
Yeah.
of being with each other and just existing. Like you don't even have to necessarily talk to each other. We'll all
Yeah.
just be in the room working, and like you can feel that love and yeah, that all the cuddles just
Yeah.
by existing together.
Well, it's rooted in a choice, Stanley. Like there's like I think that's one of the things that I've thought a lot about is even if you're blood related to someone, if you're not, it's that choice to be like, I am in relationship with you no matter what.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting now to be here and spending so much time with my family because when you're living on the other side of the country, like you don't always get
Yeah.
those times. I'll talk to them on the phone. Like I like text them and stuff, and we have our own family group chat. But like talking and hearing their voice and seeing their faces, that would happen once a week, once every other week,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but to come here and like immediately feel like at home, you don't feel like a
Mhm.
stranger, right?
Mhm.
It's it definitely has shown, or it's an example of exactly what you're talking about. Like family is just knowing that no matter what, people are going to
Yeah.
show up for you.
Totally.
And even with the folks who are still in California, who I no longer see on a day to day basis, like
Yes.
you all in
Yes.
Corporate Tiempo, like when we do see each other and talk to each other,
This is
it's
like nothing happened. Like
yeah,
nothing's no
it's
time has
like
passed.
it's just regular, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's a little bit about our families.
I love that.
And
And
I kind of started talking about this with my family, but I am wondering, you know, it's been a year. You guys have been homeschooling, and I know it's been a struggle because you've mentioned it multiple times.
it has been.
So, like, how has this quarantine um, stay at home experience sort of shifted or reaffirmed your thoughts around family?
Yeah, well, it's funny because literally in the last month we've had just such huge breakthroughs
Mm,
with both of our kids. I feel like there it was a whole range. You know, like when it first happened, we were all just like, okay, we're in survival. It's gonna, you know, it's gonna be a few days or a few weeks.
right.
Which is crazy. I don't know what we were all thinking. And so we were just kind of like in treading water mode, and then it went into like deep, like oh my god, we're never getting out of this, you know, almost like a dark depression kind of I don't know when this is ending, and then and feeling of like hopelessness, helplessness,
Mhm.
like I don't know if I could sustain this fully, you know, car rides into my neighborhood where I'm just like like full on,
Yeah.
no, really like that, like going off the deep end a little bit. And then and then kind of recollecting and moving into a place of like, okay, this is the norm. So if we're this is the norm, how are we going to really establish this as and take advantage of this time where we're both all together all the time,
Yeah.
where we can, really start leaning into like what are the things that I want my children to know and learn in the world that they're not getting in school that I have the opportunity right now to share with them.
Mhm.
So that's been like when I once I realized that, I was like, ooh, let me take advantage of this moment in time to really frame their understanding of the world. So that's I think been one of my favorite parts about this is like I know that they're going back into their schools whenever they're going to go back in a way that they're thinking about the world in a way that's deeply reflective of the things that I believe in and I think that are important for them to know and understand
Mhm.
and who they are in the world. And so I think that's been amazing. The other piece is that, you know, my oldest struggles mental health stuff, and I've just over the last month we've had some major breakthroughs around what his body needs to be able to feel whole and complete and full in the world. He started doing this jujitsu with Toledo's man, actually, with
Yeah.
TJ, who he he's just like one on one doing these these holds and these like he wants to wrestle and grapple and do all he has so much like rage and anger that needs to get directed
Mhm.
physically. Like he really needs to just like push back on the world. And he was trying to do it with me. And I'm
Want
not
to do
trying to
that?
fight you. Like, I mean, I will fight you, but I'm not trying to fight you because I will fight you because that's my instinct to like defend myself. But I'm also not, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to parent you and love you and hold
Yeah.
space for your growth. And so when TJ started coming in and it's like engaging physically with him, like really wrestling with him and like
Mhm.
making him sweat and pushing his body to the max in a way that like he really needed, his entire being has shifted. Like it's unbelievable, Stanley, and the way that he and Luca are now getting along and like loving one another and having these like special brother moments where they just play for hours because he's that. And then also we started hanging out with this place in Compton called the Urban Saddles, which with horses, and just like being both of my boys just like having regular times every week where they just like are scooping poop and riding these horses and hanging out with these beautiful creatures who are just like you have to be calm and you have to be love and you have to be listening and you're paying attention and engaged and like there's the things that are calling forth from them with these animals. It's just like honestly the last month has been like I'm like, oh my god, we figured it out. Because
Love
people
it.
have been, like my family feels transformed in some ways and it's because of it's like god, it makes me think so deeply about like our medical profession and how we don't go to the body and what the body needs as like the place of healing. And both of these examples of things that we're doing right now have to do with like social emotional
Yeah.
like health, and have to do with like our body, like what our body actually needs. Our body needs affirmation of like pressure to know that we like can like engage with it and still be safe and whole in the world. It needs to know that like we can be calm and like and also powerful simultaneously. Like there are these
Mhm.
things that like are inside of us, and we find it through dance,
Yeah.
but I think that I wouldn't be here with my family in the way that I am right now if I hadn't had this year of struggle and figuring things out, and like the thing of like showing up day after day even when things got so hard and felt so impossible and like we weren't going to be able to get out the other side. And there were times where I felt that way. I was really like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I really don't. And I've never felt that much doubt in myself around mothering. I mean, all kinds of like nasty stuff coming up about like, oh, that's why I had miscarriages because the universe was telling me I shouldn't be a mom.
Mhm.
Like I was not allowed to be a mom, and like here I did it anyway, and then now I'm getting punished.
Oh,
Like there's literally like all that kind of awful stuff that's like that's at your surface, but that like you hold it down in order to just like function in the world. I feel like this time for families, it's like things just like came out in ways because we were with each other so intensely. And I say this as like a collective we because I know so many other families who, I mean, there have been divorces, there have been like people splitting up and having to change formations and leave, you know, like because I think all those things that were kind of like sitting at the surface of so many of us,
Mhm.
just like there was no space for them to be held down anymore. And in this formation of like what family was, being together 24/7 and never being able to get away from each other, like shit gets real.
Yeah. It's funny because okay, so I have two thoughts building up in my brain. I'm going to try to remember them both as I talk about. Okay. Yeah, it's very funny that, things get real when you spend a lot of time with your family, and I
Yeah.
think that I've never been so like open and vocal and like willing to be in conversation with my parents,
Mhm.
especially,
Mhm.
ex- except throughout this time. And I feel like I've gotten to know them better as individuals, and they've also gotten to know me better as individuals.
Mhm.
And also, okay, I was an only child till I was 15 years old, and my youngest little
Yeah.
sister was born right before I left for college. So I haven't had the opportunity to be a big sister. But
Siblings,
being a
yeah.
big sister is fun, okay? Like, go make me some food. Can you just boil some noodles for me? Or, oh, I left my phone upstairs. Can you go upstairs and grab it? Like, being a big sister is fun. That okay. So that's one point that I had to make that I've had the opportunity to experience because of this time that I've spent at
Yeah.
home. And then, oh man, I said I was gonna remember. Oh, you were talking about some families that have, broken down and broken apart because of all the
Mhm.
things that have bubbled up, and
Yeah.
it made me start thinking. Like when you brought this idea to me, you specifically said family as an action and not just
Mhm.
as this like piece of matter, like a
Yeah.
phone
We
stays in
are a
your pocket.
family. Yeah.
Yeah, and just the image of like all these things that kind of stay here, and
Mhm.
they don't shift, they don't move, and they don't influence or cause
Yeah.
you to shift or move. Just that image of before family being
Mhm.
this, we exist as a family and we go through our regular routine, but
Mhm.
now having to figure out how can our family continue to mold and be malleable and move along with what's going on around us, as opposed to, or going on around us and going on within us, as opposed to just ignoring it, kind of.
Yeah, or being complacent or just kind of like the same patterns. I'm so interested in like the ancestral trauma piece about how that fits into that because I feel like there's this way in which generation after generation we carry some of that. We like the stuff that's like under the surface, just like it translates from like one person to the next. And I mean, they say I'm not a scientist, and Stanley, you are, so like help me think through this. But there's ways in which our memory and specifically trauma, but also just like our physical memory, like is encoded into our DNA, right? Like that we actually there's been scientific evidence that looking at people's DNA from generation to generation, there are specific things that kind of get encoded in there that are connected to the those memories, right? Like memories being embedded in our DNA. So I've just been thinking so much about like family as a verb, like familying, and how like familying in a specific way can actually like recode and reformulate this DNA that we're a part of. Like that the healing that you do in your family actually shifts the way that then this is going to be passed on from generation to generation. Like, isn't that incredible to think about? Like,
That is really incredible. And I think too that to okay, just thinking, right? These memories being encoded in our DNA, like it's really hard to shift what current DNA you already have. It's
yes,
it's hard. You gotta,
yeah,
there are people who get paid lots of money to do that. But,
Yes.
but to think, but even still, it's hard to like, you can, your DNA says that you're blonde, but you can dye your hair, okay, and
Yes.
not be blonde. You
Yes.
can become a redhead.
Yeah.
Um, but it's when we think about these deeper phenotypes, like these deeper gene expressions that we're passing down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's still really difficult even to pass because you're having to undo all of this other knowledge. I was having a conversation with my parents about like how they interact in the workplace versus how I interact in the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
and how they will work into the night
Mm-hmm.
because they're my mom's like, I just got this job, and I need to make sure that I'm doing as much as I can so that they know that like they chose the right person. And I'm like, Mom, they already hired you. They
Yeah.
already expressed that they think you're amazing. Like, why do
Yeah.
you feel the need to prove yourself?
Yeah.
And my dad was like, I mean, it's amazing how in their generation they felt that need, but
Mm-hmm.
because of all the things that they've done, that they've generated inside of this family, the things that they've taught me,
Yeah.
even if they aren't able to specifically practice it, the
Mm-hmm.
things that they have taught me based on the lessons that they've learned,
Mm-hmm.
now I'm able to undo it. And now I don't go into work trying to prove myself.
Yes.
If you're paying me to work 8 hours, then I'm gonna
Yeah.
do my work,
In 8 hours.
do what work I can in 8 hours, and then I'm gonna say bye.
Yes.
Like, y'all
Exactly.
hired me to do a job, and I'm gonna do the job, right? Um, but
Well,
yeah.
okay. So something else is, and this is, I'm doing this work with Holly Johnston, who does responsive body work, which is like somatic work around healing. And she was saying the other day how like your on a cellular level, our bodies are like, is it like every 70 days or something? It's like, it's basically
New
like in
body.
our you have
Yeah.
a brand new body, right? Like you have it literally like inside out, like your cells have actually replenished themselves and completely died off and create new ones have been created. So the ways in which uh that idea, the idea of like that we like I feel right now as a person like a very different human being than I did a year ago. And I had never thought about it in this level, but she was like saying how we're thinking about how that replenishment happens or how that like turnover happens, that thinking about even though the DNA code is similar, there also is something molecularly different inside of our bodies that as we are healing and as we are like transforming trauma into like learning and opening up and like dealing with things, that there is this way that we're like literally shifting as we're growing, which then is going to shift our offspring, right? Like I mean, I think about my boys, like the all of the things that are like embedded DNA and encoding that came into them that had nothing to do with my body, but in the ways in which our relationship and our like family is going to literally be shifting who they then wind up, creating as like their own offspring, and how that's going to be shifted because of living in our family and being in our family and having this like deep sense of like continually we're one of the things about like familying as a verb, right? Like the idea of like being in family as an action is that we're never like complacent. We're just, what does it mean to like be in relationship, to keep going through struggles, because it's a struggle to be in community always. And we know this in Contratiempo, we know this in our families, like community is never not gonna create struggle. It's not always gonna be a struggle. Like there might moments and times where it's gonna be easy and it's gonna feel great and it's gonna, but struggles like struggle and conflict and discord, it's all like a part of like it's like a part of life, right? And so if we can kind of like take that and be in action around thinking of it always in the context of like unpacking and healing and engaging, instead of thinking of it as something that's like a truth that we're stuck with and that we have to be just deal with and burden or hold, or like that's the thing that we're just carrying with us, and that's like it's constant and immovable and untransformable. But if our relationship with our burden or our the things that we're holding with us can be as something that we actually have the capacity to move, and there's something so inspiring about that to me, as like who we keep being and evolving into as we move forward. I don't know, there's like that's what I've been thinking about so much lately, especially with the stuff that has happened in the last month, where literally my child, who was, you know, I hate you, like the rage that was like directed both towards me and towards Luca, has transformed into like Luca's crying, and instead of him being like, get up, like I don't want to, whatever, he's sitting with him and saying, tell me about how you feel. What? Like,
You're
like
so
I
focused.
like, no, like Stanley, seriously, my head like it's exploding. Like, what? You're sitting here asking Luca to tell you about how he's feeling? And before, he was like, if Luca started crying, it would like he would literally go into attack mode. It was like if Luca cried and when Luca was sad, he would go deeply into attack mode. Like he was trying to like toughen him up and make him, like get over your, like, I mean, immediately. And it was always like, then I would have come into, into defense, and like, he's allowed to cry, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it was like this crazy dysfunctional pattern that we were in, and literally feels like it's cracked, like something has cracked in it. And he's being in a way with his brother that is like so loving and compassionate, because also I'm having more space to be that way with him, because he's not attacking me. He's not, like there's like not a that we're not engaged in fight so much. Like we've transformed the, like, okay, the fight can still happen because the fight needs to happen and we need to work out some of that stuff in our body, but the fight isn't like, I'm not the lightning rod to the fight. And God, I don't know, it's blowing my freaking mind, because I just feel like the stuff we do with dance too is so rooted in that. It's like I even think about how I always used to say, like, I would go to like church, I would go to like the salsa club and dance for 3 hours when I needed to feel and remind myself like I'm whole and okay and connected, and the ways in which we find those physical expressions and those experiences to remind our bodies that we're going to be okay, or that our bodies like need something, like it's like a need that needs to get met in order for us to be able to feel regular, to feel functional. And I just think about so much about how dance is that, is that and also how we've been so disconnected from it in that way inside of, yeah, I mean, I'm like, but
I think I'm wondering, to hear you talk about it, it feels like it was such a like drastic shift. And so I'm wondering, like, in terms of the actions, because how I think about it is like it's a persistent thing.
yes. Oh
And
no, it wasn't a drastic shift at all.
okay, okay, okay.
I mean, the
When
oh,
you
there's,
think about then and versus now, it's
yes,
very different. But as
yes.
far as the in between then and now.
In between, it's been a year. That's what I'm saying. Is like I literally, I mean, it's been the lifetime of my children, but it's also been this last year. Um, the amount of struggle, trying something, it not working, trying something else, it not working, completely falling apart, it not working. Like, like this kind of, we've been just like at it. We've just been like, as a family, just trying to figure out what to do and how to make our family not feel like in such like chaos and crisis all the time. I'm like being super real right now. Like, don't get it twisted. Here we go.
Family is crazy.
Family is wild, and like all your nasty, terrible stuff comes out to the surface. As I mean, as parents, like, I think there's this way in which that's the white supremacy piece, is like the perfectionism of like being a perfect mom or being a perfect father, having a perfect family. nobody's family is like that. Like nobody. I don't care who you are. Like I don't care how perfect you think you are. Like there's stuff underneath the surface of every single family. Some people deal with it more than others, and some people like internalize it and then need way more therapy later on. But like, but there's this idea of like, I feel like this year we've been like in the muck trying to figure out like how to function, and what we came to the conclusion of too is like a lot of it has to do with John and I. A lot of it has to do with like our relationship with each other and the ways that we contradict one another. Or I'm very like much more strict and like have my clear guidelines and rules, and he's way more like and our kids are like penduluming back or whatever. They're like don't even feel like that clarity, which they need a little more clarity. That's good for them, but but we are actually finding that it's helpful to get them boundaries so they understand where that is and they feel more safe. But that it had so much more to do with John and I too being in alignment and getting our stuff straight, and that like and then our kids as a result are going to feel much more like okay, everything's okay,
Yeah.
because we're connected and united. So doing that piece of the work, doing the work of like, Sydney wasn't sleeping at all in the beginning of quarantine. It was like a couple hours a night and would be up all night, and was sleeping in our bed. I don't know, you remember that?
I
So
do.
he's no longer sleeping in our bed.
Comes
He's
to me being like, I'm sorry, y'all, I'm so tired.
I'm like, I have not slept in 3 days. Really? No, really. And so we've gotten the sleeping back on track. I mean, it's so many layers of all of it.
Yeah.
Um, the eating, the eating piece, like limiting sugar and inflammatory kind of stuff, because it has to do with again connecting with your brain. Just all of it. It's not like it's perfect. I take my kids to get ice cream sometimes. Like that's okay. Like, we're not sitting here and like trying to like over control everything, but there is a sense of like of getting in alignment with specific things that were actually out of alignment and not allowing us to be our best selves.
Mhm.
And just so it's been like chipping away, and there's been more resistance around certain things. And I just feel like there's this sense of again understanding how both the community, the contratiempo community, like being able to be moving and dancing and creating still inside of the midst of all of this, has allowed me to like remember that I'm like a person outside of just this relationship and experience.
Mhm.
But it's also, I feel like so much of the struggle that we went through as an organization and are continuing to kind of like excavate has like impacted and influenced the way that also I'm thinking about being in relationship with my family, and like and thinking about white supremacy and the way that white supremacy shows up in parenting, and shows up in the ways that we're teaching our kids, and the ways that we're engaging in both educating but also like growing as a family. And it's just like it's all it's all connected.
It's fine.
So
I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, to answer your question, it's not overnight at all. Like I feel like it's been a journey, and we're still in it. Like it's not like we're done.
No, yeah. I've been thinking about it because I'm not a parent, so I don't necessarily have that parent-child relationship to draw on. But I think about it in the context of dance, what you were talking about, everything being intertwined and like feeding into the growth in one area, feeding into the growth, and then they're just going back and forth.
Yes.
And it's been a long time since I've danced. Like I went from dancing 40 plus hours a week to teaching 2 hours a week.
Yeah.
Like it was not. And so now trying to get back into my body,
Mhm.
it was kind of a mental game because I was like, oh my goodness, my butt is a little bit wider, like
None of our
just to
costumes are
swing
gonna fit.
look, just to swing my shoulder starts cracking. Like I'm not sure I can do all of this, and then people still expect me to dance like how I used to, and they're saying, "Oh yeah, come to this class, it'll be your level," and I'm like, I can't get down to the floor and then back up that fast. Like, what are you talking about? Um, and I say all that, so that's the mental part of it. But I also feel that all the life that I've lived outside
Mhm.
of the dance world has
Mhm.
fed into like um, the creativity part of
Mhm.
just whether I'm actually choreographing something or whether I'm just freestyling. Like
Mhm.
I'm dancing my life, even if I'm not dancing, this particular step that was in a music video, right? It's
Mhm.
I'm dancing my life.
Mhm.
Um, and also like that creative side, that analytical, that exploratory has also been feeding into how I live my life. Like I approach things and I'm asking questions. I'm asking like, how does that work? Or what if you do it this way? Or like
Mhm.
I feel like they're both feeding into each other. And so yeah,
Mhm.
family influence how you interact inside of your family unit influences how you interact outside of the world, and how you interact outside of the world influences how you act in your family unit. And it's
Mhm.
so like I feel like it's so important to be um, I want to say clear, but that doesn't feel like the right word. But um, intentional
Mhm.
about how you're treating people in general. Like, yeah, just being very intentional about how you're treating people and how you're treating yourself as well.
Yes.
And that's like, yeah, yeah.
Oh
Hmm.
my God. The treating each other and treating yourself both is so tied into each other, but also I think that's a huge thing that I've had to like overcome and struggled with over this time.
Hmm.
Um, is
Specifically,
the
like within your family, like inside your family, or just in general.
Yeah, I think inside my family and I think inside of our company. I think there was a way in which I was always like not thinking of myself in terms of like uh, being of service and being of service and being about others and being about others. That actually is it's a crutch and it's like there's like an inauthenticity to it. There's
Mm-hmm.
like a ooh, how am I going to say this? There's like this way in which to be for other people all the time is actually, it's like it's a dysfunctional way to be about community because you're actually, if you're not taking care of yourself, you actually don't have as large of a capacity to be able to like be of service to others. And it winds up being that it becomes an excuse for you to be dysfunctional or not to be as like healthy. Ooh, I don't know. Is that it, that there's something that like when you just said the dancing my life, it made me really, it resonates because there's a way in which I think our, and again I'm talking about like family and contratiempo simultaneously, but there's this way in which I think our value is about contribution and is about like what are we doing for the world and what are we adding to the world. um but there's this sense of um self-care being absent from that value or that goal. And then a lot of times I think self-care sounds indulgent, or self-care sounds like a privilege or something that you're like is very white people like that, like that you can like
Yeah.
have the capacity for self-care. you know it's like that's and that's just not right. Like everybody needs to be able to have space for self-care, no matter who you are, no matter how much money you have, no matter what your family background is, how much melanin you have in your skin, whatever. It like literally
Yeah.
every single human being deserves the capacity to like take care of themselves and to be loved and whole inside themselves. And so I think that has been huge because when I started just acknowledging that even in our company, I realized how out of integrity I was for that. Like even just like admitting to you all that like I really want to make art. I really want to make work. Like and 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 so like even doing that, like even saying that out loud and just being really honest about like I don't want to be a grant writer and like a just only like running administratively this like I want to actually be an artist. I am an artist and I want to be an artist, and like I got to be honest with that about, you know, like I really got to be. And that like me being an artist doesn't mean that other people can't creatively contribute or also have projects, or that we can, it doesn't mean that Contratiempo has to be about only Ana Maria. It
Mhm.
can be so much bigger than me, but I should be allowed to be an artist
Yeah.
inside of this space. And I wasn't being honest about that before. And it wound up biting me in the ass because like it wound up in some ways um, being something that really I got confronted by it, because I had like built this like image on like being of contribution without like really again being honest about myself. And I think the same thing with the family is like there's a way of like you know, having sacrificed so much for the kids to be able to be happy, and that's actually not functional and healthy for them, to like have a mother that is so depleted and so exhausted and so, you know, not at her best self, that I'm actually not able to be the person that I want to be as a mother if I'm not like taking a bath every night eating food that nourishes my body or what, you know, like it actually I realized like self-care doesn't need to be that elaborate. It's like there's just
Yeah.
some things that I like just need to do to feel okay.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You started talking about this, but I'd love for you to like dig a little deeper about um, the fa- being inside of a family unit, like you inside of that house with John, Sid, Luca, but also in the greater community, like in your community engagement work. How does that speaking up, being honest about what it is that you need? How do those things show up inside of
Mm.
your larger engagement work?
Mm. Um, I mean, it's funny, like in a very simple example, I feel like um, the like my desire these days to always start class or to start in any kind of engagement with like breath
Mm-hmm.
and centering is so related to that. My tendency always before was to like jump right in and like start like because that's my personality. It's like what I, you know, it's my racket, is what I lean on as like my defense mechanism to just be like super excited and overly, you know, positive and and yes, it's like cheerleader, right?
Yeah.
um, and actually that like centering and breathing before we start serves me to be able to like you know be a more both a more powerful engaged leader inside of a space, but also as like a listener. It like it allows me to like engage in like being present with who's in the space, and being inside of a space of okay, like there's a reciprocity, there's a fluidity of back and forth, that it's not just about me performing, right, but it's about let's just all connect on our breath and in this space together, and then let's move forward together, and we can still be excited and you know, energetic and positive and all that can still happen, but that if we can start together, that there's a way in which yeah, there's the sense of like authenticity and connection that's at the root of what we're doing versus performance, you know. So I feel like there's a way in which some of this just rolling up my sleeves and trying things has to do with the evolving ideas of like engagement as being as engagement as being familying or collectiving. I don't know, like again, making a verb out of this idea of like being in community.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think for family, a lot of it's shown up with really asking for what I need, like saying I need to have this hour right now to be able to like not be bothered and to like have some space for myself, and or I need to go and like be with my girl in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
and for an hour on Wednesday mornings at 6:30 a.m. I need you to handle like asking specifically what I need and saying out loud this need, naming it, naming what I need to support me to do it, and then holding the people around me accountable that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And there's breakdowns, and sometimes it doesn't happen, and sometimes people schedule over when I said I needed you, and but also I've realized that the like naming the need and then sharing that with my partner and seeing what I actually need in order to help support that need
Mm-hmm.
just is such a huge part of it happening.
Mm-hmm.
And before I was like, there was like a way I think I was expecting people to support me, but not actually asking for what I needed. So I think it's the asking and saying what you really need and
Mm-hmm.
admitting to yourself what you really need,
Yeah.
that feels so critical.
Um, my first entry into like organizing was through Contratiempo, and I think that like because it was paired so closely with presenting a dance and like it it to me community engagement was performing, like we're
Yeah.
performing community engagement.
Yeah.
um but I think
Woo!
something that I've
Performing
learned,
community engagement. It's so
like I think though this past year the community engagement was disconnected from performing. Like I
Mhm.
wasn't performing anything, I was just out there with people, and it's really framed even how like yeah, it's really changed how I go when I go into spaces where I'm serving. It's shifted how I enter into the space. It's not like I'm here to serve, like what's up, what can I do, what do you need. It's not, it's less about that and more about, hey, my name is Stanley, like what's your name, what do you like, what are y'all doing right here. Oh, that's cool, can I help out, can I help out with that. It's become more um
Relational.
relational, yes, as opposed to I'm here to show up because this is what you called me to do, right?
Mhm, mhm.
I don't know what this is.
I was like, what's that?
Uh, but and and also this is something that, and it really applies to no matter what subject you talk about, but something that I've been trying to just live my life over the past few months has been about relationships, just about getting to know people, like genuinely asking them questions, asking them about themselves, genuinely like opening up about myself. Because that's always kind of been something that I'm like, oh, they don't really want to hear about me. Like, I'm just sit in the corner.
That's that thing. That's that thing I'm talking
Yeah, it's yeah.
about. Me.
But yeah, like genuinely caring. And I feel like that's something that you can learn from when you're around your family and bringing it to the outside world, that I feel like will create this more like loving and just society if we enter into the world like ideally you'd enter into your family, like you just
Mhm.
genuinely love and care for these people and you just want to know like where you been, what you up to now, where you trying to go, like let's have this conversation and let's talk about it, and then we can support each other in both of our goals, right? And that's been something that I've been aiming to do more of as I enter out into the world away
Yeah.
from my family, um away from my family, like outside of my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
That makes me think when I hear you say that, it makes me think of also that idea of like what it would the world be if we were in relationship with one another as if we were a family.
mhm, mhm,
Like you hear people talk about like the human race as a family, right? Like that we are all in some ways related. Like we actually are all generated from the same DNA and the same human. But like what if we actually really like lived that and 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 in a way that like even like I started talking about my, relatives who voted for Trump, who I deeply love as people. Like I love them, and I I'm mad at them about their politics, but it doesn't change that like I would be there for them no matter what, like if they called on me and needed something, I would absolutely be there. Like what would that look like if that's how we were in relationship with one another? Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um if that we're just that sense of our commitment to one another was so rooted and so clear. Oh
Mhm.
my God, can you imagine? Like the world would be a very different place.
It'd be a very different place. It'd be, I don't know. I feel like I have mixed feelings about it because there are some times where I'm just like, look, I'm trying to get in and get out. I'm not trying to treat you like you my auntie and we're gonna be in here talking for hours. Like, um and I don't know, I can't remember who brought this up. It might have been our last Don't Get It Twisted conversation, you, me, and Toledo.
Mhm,
Um, I don't know. I could be lying, but we were talking about how Contratiempo feels like this family,
mhm,
um, and like we're creating together and we're laughing together and we're spending time even outside of the studio together.
yeah,
But then like when we come together and it's business, it kind of feels like
yeah,
um,
mhm,
and I that thought came in my head and I was wondering why, like
mhm,
my parents talked to me about business stuff. They're like, okay, when are you leaving? Like they talked, or like, okay, like, um, let's see, it was 2 months that I moved here. They're like, okay, are you gonna get another job? Or what's happening? Or like we'll talk about monies, like, okay, let's figure out how to make a budget and talk about what we're spending money on. Like we we do business as a family, but
yeah.
why is that? I'm just curious about that. Like
It's
interacting as a
interesting though. Do
family
you
doesn't
think?
necessarily mean we're all like cuddly
Do
and kid.
you notice? So it's interesting you say that. Do you notice a difference in that recently? Like you haven't been in the engagement meetings or the staff meetings, so it's hard because okay, so because let me say I noticed a difference in that recently, in that in our staff meetings now there's space and time for connection. Like we intentionally have been making like there's a little bit of space and time for us to be human and connected and like laugh, and then we like shift gears and we do what we need to do. Like
Yeah.
that's what it's been feeling like lately.
Mhm.
And I think, and that's been an intentional shift because I think the way that it used to be was like, again, we would start like laughing and connecting, and then we'd be like, okay, we gotta,
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's focus. Yeah.
and so I think that, yeah, I think part of that has been the conversation around white supremacy and white supremacy culture is like looking at places, okay, like where are we
Mhm.
reinforcing this
Yeah.
and where is the places that we want to like transform it. And I think there's somewhere around like how bringing that connection and that familial space of like being able to be in relationship as an intention, it doesn't have to undermine getting work done. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to make it impossible to like be functional, and you can still be human and you can still be really effective and get results
Mhm.
simultaneously. Those things can happen simultaneously. And so
Yeah.
I know for myself I've been trying to lean in more to that, both in a leadership role in the company but also in like my meetings with Jeanette and Ruby around our arts education stuff, or like how can we be, yeah, how can we be like
Family
still,
can still get stuff done. Yeah.
yes,
And
yeah,
those things don't have to be mutually exclusive too. Like
no,
it's just
no,
about
either
I mean,
or, it doesn't have to be either or,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's that white supremacist culture, either or thinking.
Yes. Totally, I know, it's all like every single time you say anything I'm like, whoop, let's
Yeah.
No, I'm telling you, it's deep. It's
Yeah.
deep the patterns that we get in, and it's deep the power of intentionally unraveling those patterns.
And I,
I mean,
oh, whoa. Okay. Go with me on this journey because we was talking about how it was intentional and like I feel like I don't know. I don't know the historical context, but the whole idea of family being so separate from work, like those
yes,
things being separate, or even like personal relationships being so
industrialization.
separate from professional relationships. Like
Yeah,
as
yeah.
last week in Racism in the Dance World, Karita Griffith's workshop,
Mhm.
um, she was telling this story about how she was meeting with some artistic director or something to go over something. I don't remember the exact story, but he started off the meeting not saying, "Okay, what can I do to be more anti-racist?" He started off the meeting like, "Tell me about you. Like, what do you do?" And that allowed the meeting to be more like go deeper, even though they don't necessarily have a previous personal relationship. It
Yeah.
was strictly professional, but the professional didn't exclude the person. It didn't
Mhm.
exclude the people.
Oh,
Um,
so deep.
yeah, like those things.
Yes,
We can be family and still get stuff done. Just
absolutely
period.
can. No, and it's industrialization, like factory, like having to be like the production piece, or bodies being for work, right? Like slavery, or the idea of the yeah, the separation of like my body is only for the purpose of getting work, or working, of actually accomplishment, or what is it, product, of creating product, right? Like that's the role of my body, versus like, no, the roles of our body are being in relationship with one another,
Mhm.
and the power of like being in community inside of being productive. Like how
It
can we be,
creates productivity. Like our
yes,
bodies are meant to be in relationship with each other, and those relationships is what promotes and creates the productivity.
yes,
Oh,
yes,
I gotta write that down. Hold on. Our bodies are
so
meant.
good. And it's, I mean, that Stanley is revolutionary, right? Like that is real. Yeah. Ooh, it's so good.
What creates productivity? This is so good, and I feel like this is going to be such a good like jumping off point into the conversations that I'm having with Delphi and Ruby at the beginning of April, because Ruby and I were going to be talking about capitalism
Mhm.
and like other social structures.
Yeah.
And then Delphi and I are going to be talking about community care and self care and how
Mhm.
they're in
Oh,
relationship with each other.
talk about
So
all of it.
I feel like this is really good. This is so good.
Like, let's lay the foundation and then
Yes,
like go
yes,
in.
yes. Thank
Well,
you so much, Ana Maria. If you had any other final thoughts, things that you
no, it's
share.
like it's such a pleasure. Like I feel like these conversations are an example of that, being in relationship with one another, and how incredibly productive and powerful it is to do that, because these conversations move our thinking, and then move our being, and then move the world, right? So I love you, and I feel so grateful that you created this platform, and that we got to do it again. So thanks.
Uh, don't get it twisted. Family and work is not separate. Thank you so much, Ana Maria. It's a pleasure talking to you.